Hi, I'm Gayatri from Miara Health. Today we are in conversation with Dr. Shweta Chandrasekharan. She is a ENT specialist with a fellowship in pediatric airway disorders and a diploma in allergy and asthma. She has a decade of experience in ENT and allergy in both hospital and private practice settings in Bangalore. Hi, Shweta.
Hi, Gayatri.
Welcome to our expert interview series.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, so let us dive straight in. So, what are the most common infections and most common ailments the children come with?
To start off, I can say that children form a very important part of our ENT practice.
Mm-hmm.
Almost 30 to 40% of the patients who walk into a general ENT practice will be children. And
Okay.
this is because, children get exposed to a whole host of infections which involve the nose and throat, which are major portals of entry for
Mm-hmm.
infections. And because they're young and they're building their immunity, and the nose and throat are sites of immune activity, sometimes when the process goes a little off, they end up with infections, and this is exceedingly common, and we see a whole lot of children coming into our practice.
Okay.
And so in terms of what common ailments they come with, I think broadly we can say that they can be infectious causes and non-infectious causes. So
Okay.
the infections would be most commonly, of course, would be infections of the nose and sinuses,
Mm-hmm.
throat infections such as tonsillitis, or ear
Okay.
infections. Now, ear
Okay.
infections particularly involve the pediatric age group, as I'm sure all of you with children will know.
Yeah.
Kids do end up with these infections quite often. And other non-infectious causes that kids come with to an ENT specialist would be, one is allergies, which is
Mm-hmm.
now on the increase in the pediatric and in the adult population. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we see commonly are nasal allergies, sometimes, which involves the eye as well. And a lot of kids have coexistent wheezing, and they may have food allergies, they may have skin allergies. So this needs to be kind of looked at as a whole, as a
Okay.
systemic problem, and not just an ENT problem, because it can affect different systems. And other non-infectious ailments that they come with are foreign bodies. Now, this is very common in the younger age group, especially the below
Yeah.
fives. So, they play with these little toys, and it's very common for them to put small toy parts, in the nose, or they swallow it and it gets stuck somewhere, sometimes in the ear too. And one needs
Okay.
to really be careful about small batteries, and, these small lithium batteries and things like that. So a lot of times kids tend to put these
Thanks.
wherever. So it's important to sort of keep a close watch, and try to keep these small parts away from the under fives. And
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So removing these small things is just it's a small procedure or
Yeah, so in most cases, it is an outpatient procedure, and it can be
okay.
removed in the clinic setting itself. Especially
Mm-hmm.
the ear ones are fairly easy to remove, because they really don't have too much
Place
place
to
to go
be.
to. They just get stuck there. But the throat ones especially are very tricky.
Okay.
They almost never can be removed in a clinic setting. They will
Okay.
need to be done in a hospital setting under anesthesia, because it's hard to access that
Okay.
area of the body. So nose depends. I mean, if it's very close to the exit, then we just
Mhm.
take it out. It's fairly simple. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now going to some of these ones that are infectious and maybe in
Yeah.
some of the allergy ones. So, what will be the preventive methods parents can follow at home? And
Okay.
if they do come if to the say, clinic, what do you expect? What information should they have with them when they come to you?
Okay. I think first thing as parents and doctors, what we need to remember is that about 8 to 10 upper respiratory infections per year are considered perfectly normal in kids.
Okay.
So, it's all a part of them growing up, and it's a part of them building their immunity. And so 8 to 10 infections are quite common. And we normally see spikes, when a child enters school, or in the winter time when everybody
Okay.
is indoors. So these are the times when we see a spike in these infections. So 8 to 10 is normal.
Mhm.
But what happens when your child gets one? So if the fever is mild, that is, say, below 102, then you can give simple antipyretics such as Crocin or whatever is locally
Okay.
available there to bring the fever down, some tepid sponging, increase the fluid intake. So these are things that you can start off by yourself at home,
Okay.
and while you wait to consult or wait for an appointment. And once the fever is high, if it's 103, or if the child is sort of showing signs of decreased activity and decreased appetite and sort of lethargy and
Yeah.
things like that, then you do need to sort of act faster and go to the doctor quickly.
Okay.
And in terms of how can you prevent these things, I think kids will end up getting these infections. So basic hygiene measures like hand washing and keeping your utensils separate will sort of help in decreasing the spread within the household if there are siblings, for example.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
also it's very important that even if a child has mild fever, it's very important to sort of keep them away from other kids,
Okay.
even if they feel like going out, and if they feel like playing. If there is a fever and if they do have an illness, it's very important to not let them interact with other kids, because this will lead to spread of infection within the community, and there may be vulnerable kids out there who may have other
Yeah.
conditions that predispose them to getting these infections quicker.
Okay.
So it's important that a child is fever free for at least 24 hours without medicines before you send them out to rejoin the community.
Okay.
And in terms of prevention, like specifically in the from the point of view of ear infections, I think I would like to say that to prevent ear infections, it's important to when you're bottle feeding or when you're feeding a very small infant, it's important to keep the head a little elevated.
Oh, okay.
So so that the milk or the fluid goes straight down and it doesn't back up into the ears. So that is one preventive strategy I would advise parents to follow.
Okay.
And in terms
Interesting.
of information that a doctor may look for when you go to the clinic is maybe if there is any pattern to the fever, like if there are any specific spikes that you've noted, or if the child has shivering or chills, these may point towards specific illnesses. And
Yeah.
any history of contact with a person with a specific illness. An immunization record would be important, because we are not seeing, especially in developed countries, there are certain pockets where people choose not to vaccinate their kids, and there are
Yes.
outbreaks of measles and whooping cough in these populations. So it's very important to know if the child has been immunized or not,
Okay.
and also important to know if the child is allergic to any medication, so that we don't waste time giving that medicine and going through the whole allergy
Yes.
process. And also helps to know if the child has any pre-existing conditions like juvenile diabetes or any immunocompromised status or hemophilia, or any
Yeah.
other significant
True.
history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good points there. So, a very important question when it comes to the infectious diseases.
Okay.
We have the viral and the bacterial infections. So
Yeah.
when is antibiotics prescribed? How do you know if it's a viral or bacterial? When is antibiotics prescribed?
Okay. Good question, and I think an important one, because everybody wants to know what about antibiotics.
Yes.
So I think the answer to that is, initially in the first at least 2 to 3 days of any fever or any um, illness, it's most likely due to a viral cause. And in
Okay.
that situation, antibiotics will not help. And
Hmm.
starting an antibiotic too early in the illness, it doesn't really do any good.
Okay.
So it's always better to sort of manage conservatively. If the disease is mild,
Okay.
try to just manage with symptomatic treatment and see if it gets better. And if it's not getting better, then one needs to consider a bacterial infection, because a
Okay.
bacterial infection usually sets in a couple of days after the viral.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and in that case also, it's important to make note of specific things, like certain organisms are susceptible to certain antibiotics. So you cannot just give any antibiotic.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and also in some cases, you may need to take a sample. Like for example, you may need to take a swab from the throat, or you may need to do a blood sampling or a stool sampling, depending on what the illness is. And that will help us identify which is the best antibiotic for the case.
Okay.
So I think the bottom line here is don't start antibiotics on your own
Yeah.
for multiple reasons, such as what I've mentioned, and also that antibiotics are given in the pediatric population as per their body weight. It's calculated as per their body weight.
Okay.
So what your doctor gave you like a year ago that dosage may not hold true today because your child has grown. So don't start it on your own. Always go to a doctor and have them assess and then start it for you.
Yeah, okay. Good point. So coming back to ear infections that you mentioned, which is very common with kids.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the treatment for these ear infections? And so ear infection is again one place where antibiotics is prescribed, I guess, a little more.
Yes. Yeah.
So can you explain that a little better?
Sure. So first of all, I mean, let's talk about why are ear infections, so common in children. I mean, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that there's a tube called the eustachian tube, which connects the back of the nose to the middle ear. And in children, everybody has this, but in children, the tube it doesn't function as well as it does in adults. So it makes it very easy for an infection in the nose to quickly travel through the tube and enter the ears. So they are far more susceptible to a ear infection as compared to adults. And also, the certain children with certain conditions such as a cleft lip, or children with Down syndrome or any other facial anomalies, these children are even more susceptible to getting ear infections.
Yeah, what is the treatment procedure for when they come for a ear infection?
Okay, so basically, ear infection is something that we almost never ignore. It needs to be treated. So it's not like a cold; it's something more than that. So what happens in a ear infection is that almost always the child will have a history of a cold or a stuffy nose or a sinusitis, anything before the ear infection. And typically they have pain in the ears, severe pain that wakes them up in the night. They can't stop crying, especially younger ones. They can't pinpoint to it, so they just cry a lot. So, those are the times you should think of a ear infection. And they do need antibiotics most of the time, and that needs to be seen by an ENT specialist or a pediatrician who will be able to start it for you. And another thing to watch out for in the case of ear infection, sometimes what happens when the infection subsides, there can be a persistence of fluid in the middle ear, which is sterile fluid. It's not an infection anymore, but the fluid is there. And why this is important is that fluid collection can cause a decrease in hearing for the child to a small extent, but then it's significant for a child who is learning to speak and who's attending school, and they're not getting the full auditory input. And people typically, like teachers or parents will say, oh, my child is very inattentive, but it's not an attention problem, it's a fluid buildup in the ear. So it's important to sort of check these kids for fluid buildup in the ear, which can be treated very easily. But it's important to identify it. A lot of times it goes unidentified, and that leads to problems in other areas of their life.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't think about that. So when does a ear infection become worse that they require any extra procedures? Because sometimes they require extra procedure for the ear infection.
Yeah, yes, very good question. So what happens, like I mentioned, when there is this fluid buildup in the ear, we normally follow them up for a period of 3 months to see whether it goes away on its own. And it's reasonable to give that much of a waiting period for the body to sort of heal itself. But sometimes that doesn't happen, and if the fluid persists beyond 3 months, then it's advisable to take it out. And how do we do this? It's a very simple procedure done under anesthesia. It's a few minutes per year. So basically, it involves a microscopic instrument that is put inside the ear to take out the fluid, and usually a ventilation tube is left in place. So that kind of helps to drain out any fluid that keeps forming, and it prevents accumulation of this fluid. So, and these ventilation tubes can be left in place for about a year or so, and then they fall out naturally. A lot of kids all over the world, they get this. It's quite common. It doesn't interfere with the child's day-to-day life. In fact, it benefits them greatly because they don't end up with, so many ear infections anymore. Only thing is that they can't swim, but then that's the trade-off.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's good to know what the treatment is. Now that we've spoken about infections, let's come to the whole aspect of allergies.
Okay.
Now, what are the most common allergies kids come with? and
Okay.
especially airborne allergies. Today we will talk about airborne allergies.
Everyone. Yeah.
So what are the most common airborne allergies do children come with?
Okay. So airborne allergies are the most common of all the
Okay.
allergies.
Okay.
And we do see a lot of children who come with symptoms of airborne allergies. The commonest offending agent or the commonest allergen is the dust mite.
Okay.
So the dust mite is basically a tiny microscopic insect that
Mm-hmm.
lives everywhere in our homes. Okay, and it likes to live in places where there's a lot of human contact. So basically, it lives in your mattress, it lives in your bed sheets, it lives in your pillows, cushions, etc. And why does it do that? Because it feeds on the skin cells that we keep shedding all the time. That's its food.
Okay.
So it lives, mostly in upholstery and bedding and places where they have access to these skin cells.
Mhm.
And what happens is that they are very potent allergens, these dust mites. So in
Okay.
susceptible people, they can cause a whole host of symptoms, starting from nasal symptoms, which would involve like sneezing and runny nose, to symptoms in the eye where there's a lot of itching and watering, and they can
Okay.
even go on to for the patient to progress to go on to develop asthma and wheezing and lung issues like
Okay.
that. So
Okay.
they can cause a whole host of allergic symptoms, and these are the most common offenders. Like I
Okay.
would say maybe 80% of all, 80% or even more of all airborne allergies are due to dust mite, and the
Okay.
other 20% are due to other causes, such as the next common one would be cockroaches, which is also universally present. And there's pollen of course depends on where you live, and the
This
vegetation
season.
there, and seasons and things like that depends on geography. And then there's fungi, there's indoor fungi and there's outdoor fungi. And then there's pet dander, cats most commonly, followed by
Okay.
dogs. So
Okay.
these are the common airborne allergens that
Allergens.
we come across.
How do you first recognize that it's a dust mite allergy? And then what would you
Okay.
do to prevent it?
Okay, good point. So a dust mite allergy is almost always seen indoors. You will not get
Okay.
it when you step out of the house. You will have it when you are indoors. So that is
Mhm.
a key point that suggests a dust mite allergy.
Allergy. Yeah. Okay.
It will be indoors. And what can you do about it is, once the diagnosis of allergy is established, there are
Mhm.
certain measures you can take to sort of decrease the allergen load in your house.
Okay.
So you need to sort of wash your sheets once a week in 60 degrees or more hot water. That will kill the mites. And you need to get rid of heavy upholstery, like no heavy drapes and big carpets and lots of pillows and soft toys. For children, that's important. If they're always surrounded by their soft toys, they can harbor dust mites. And so these are the ways in which you can sort of eliminate the allergen load in your house.
Okay.
And in spite of that, some people will have symptoms. So there are symptomatic medicines that you can, like sprays, tablets, etc., to control the symptoms.
Okay.
And another treatment that is now being followed worldwide and is highly recommended is immunotherapy,
Okay.
which is specific for the allergen, for the offending
Okay.
allergen in a particular person's system. So
Okay.
what's done is that it's like a desensitization program to that particular allergen. So
Okay.
it's either given in the form of injections or it's given in the form of a tablet. It depends, and it's highly recommended that a confirmed case of allergy, patient, it's highly recommended they go through this, because then it prevents the progression of the disease. Like a person who today has only nasal symptoms may in a few years develop asthma. But if you take immunotherapy, it kind of halts progression. So,
Okay.
it decreases the amount of medications you need. And there's a financial benefit because, spending on these medications all year round can be a burden. But
Mhm.
immunotherapy is for a couple of few years. And after that, you will not need that many medicines anymore. So there's a lot of
True.
benefits to that. So these are
Yeah.
the ways in which you can handle allergies. And all of these treatments are safe for kids, and it's recommended to start them early. So if your child has
Okay.
allergies, you can look into all of this.
Okay. So that's good. So first you said you can prevent it in the house by
Yeah.
reducing the allergen.
Yes.
And then beyond that, you go back to the doctor, get some medication for relief.
Yeah.
And when it's persistent, you go through a
You go.
desensitization
Yes. Yes.
program.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and to identify that this is for sure the allergen, there is a test in between
Yes.
where they
So
do
there are,
identify.
yeah. So there are tests to be done to identify it. What's commonly done and what we allergists believe is the gold standard is a skin prick test. So it's
Okay.
basically done on the skin where you put
Okay.
little drops of the allergen and then you watch for a reaction to that. And this is done real time and it's almost always 100% right. You know,
Okay.
you can certainly identify the allergen in this case. But
Okay.
in some patients who are sort of unwilling to do this or who cannot do this, or small children who don't like, these kind of tests, there are, who don't like the pinpricks, there are blood tests available which are
Okay.
also fairly good to
Okay.
diagnose allergic disorders.
Okay. That sounds good. I think that covered almost all that we wanted to speak about.
Okay.
Uh, and is there similar procedure followed for like seasonal allergies and the other kind of allergens?
So it's very important to know about the seasonality of the symptoms because then it gives us a clue as to what is the offending agent. It's most likely a pollen or a grass or something.
Yeah.
So, and then you have these pollen calendars which kind of tell you which is the flowering season for a particular tree or shrub or
Yeah.
whatever. And then that helps you sort of identify for that patient what could be the cause.
Yeah.
So it's important to note that.
Okay.
But the treatment kind of follows the same principles, which is one is you try to eliminate exposure, second is you try to treat symptomatically, and third is you do immunotherapy. So broadly,
Okay.
the treatment for allergies falls under these.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So I think that covered all the questions we had for today. And
Okay.
thank you for taking time out and talking to us and clarifying doubts.
Oh
Uh,
no, happy to be here and
yeah,
hope this benefits people who are listening to it.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayatri.